Hey, welcome into a jam-packed edition of The Sweat. I'm Adam Kaufman. He's Brendan Glasheen. We are just both thrilled it is Friday.
Yeah, that's for sure. Not just because we're anxious for the weekend, but we've also got some special guests on the show. Former Packers receiver, Hall of Famer with the team, Super Bowl champion Antonio Freeman is going to come on with us. And then we've got Mike Francesa, WFAN talk show host. It's another Francesa Friday. And, hey, you got a chance to talk to Mike again today.
Extensively, yeah. It had been a couple of weeks. You're going to hear
you guys
from Mike
missed
a
each
little
other.
bit later on. We did. A lot. But before we welcome in the sports pope, let's bring in a couple of guys who like to sling some sports poop. Jeff Ulrich and Julian Edlow. Hey, boys.
I see Julian's taking the Bill Belichick dressing school to heart here today. That's great.
Yeah, he's got the hoodie going. Is that cut off? Do you have your sleeves?
Yes, guys, I'm wearing a sweatshirt.
I'm Julian. We're on to the sweat.
Thanks for dressing up for the show.
Yep, no problem.
We're on to the sweat.
Yeah.
On to the sweat.
It's a great impression. Carry on.
Yeah, so, hey, let's talk NFL price check, guys. Sorry, Belichick impersonations. QBs first. How can we not after Nick Mullens last night
really
for
good.
San Francisco? Yeah, pretty good. Matt Ryan's price went down $700 this week to $5,700. He has the third highest points per game total in fantasy production for the afternoon slate for quarterbacks. Is his price correct? A lot of moolah, to put it shortly. Is he correctly priced against Washington, Jeff?
I think he's pretty close to being a correct price this week. I mean, you look what Matt Ryan's done. It's been pretty solid this year for fantasy. Then you look at the matchup and you can kind of understand the price. Washington is a pace-down team. I mean, they have a pretty solid defense. This game total doesn't really jump out at you at 47, but at the same time, it's a close spread. So if this game does delve into a back and forth, a shootout is possible here. And I think taking a chance with Matt Ryan, pairing him with Julio Jones, who at some point you would think is going to find the end zone and doesn't have the worst matchup in the earth this week, it's not a bad play. So I think anything cheaper for Matt Ryan would be too cheap. And I think anything more expensive would be not really, you could probably cross him off, but I like this price for Matt Ryan.
Julian, your thoughts on $5,700 for Matt Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, to answer the question, I do think that Matt Ryan is appropriately priced, but I don't really have any interest in him this week. He's only played 2 road games, so his high DK points per game is pretty much a product of playing at home in the Dome. If you take his 2 games on the road this season, he's averaging under 13 DraftKings points. So Jeff mentioned it. It's a pace-down game. If you want to play him in tournaments, sure, he is priced correctly, but I'm not really interested in Matt Ryan in this spot.
All right, Jules, let's see if you're more interested in Alex Smith because he's intriguing. He's $5,000 facing a horrible Falcons defense. Is this a good play at that price?
Yeah, I'm definitely not interested in Alex Smith. Look at his game log. Like, the only comparable spot that he's been in this season was at New Orleans, one of the worst secondaries in the NFL, and he didn't even reach 16 DraftKings points, and that was in the Dome. This game's going to be outside in Washington. So, there are just so many quarterbacks in better spots than Alex Smith. I understand the matchup is a plus, but we don't need to look at paying down all the way to Alex Smith at $5,000.
Jeff, are you equally disgusted by Alex Smith?
No, I mean, I think there's some potential here. Obviously, you do have to take into account that Washington wants to pass the ball as less as possible. I mean, they're a bottom 10 team in terms of pass attempts on the year. But every single quarterback, excluding week 1, Nick Foles, has pretty much gone off against the Falcons. So it's definitely out there. I think Smith maybe still isn't quite have the upside that you want to use him for tournaments, but as a cash game play, you have to think his floor is going to be pretty safe this week. And he also can throw in a few rush yards. So if you're going the cheap quarterback route, I'd probably go Alex Smith for a cash game lineup. Again, I don't love the upside. I think his upside has increased, but I don't think it's quite good enough to start targeting in tournaments.
Chris Thompson is also out for the Redskins. That's a weapon taken away from Mr. Smith. Let's go to Ben Roethlisberger. He has been boom or bust. And Adam chose to spell my name as Brandon on our script today because he's trying to sound like Jeff. I see what his joke was.
All right.
Hey, like Matt Ryan, Big Ben is down to $5,700. Do you like that price against the Ravens, Giraffe?
I don't. I mean, it's from a game theory perspective, stacking the Steelers probably has some 5% ownership in big tournaments, probably has some appeal, but it's hard to see it really happen here. Ben has gone off against the Ravens like once or twice in his career, but generally they've played them pretty tough. And you look at the Ravens defense, I mean, they've played quarterbacks really tough this year. I mean, they've allowed one 300-yard passer on the season. That doesn't bode well for this week. So, you know, considering how much you have to pay up to like Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster to stack with Ben, I think the correct play is just avoid the spot.
Julian, 5,700 for Big Ben. You in?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason we're talking about guys who have averaged so many DraftKings points this season, like Matt Ryan and Ben Roethlisberger, down at this price point, and it's because they're in really bad spots. It's a divisional game. It's on the road. It's against the team that ranks second against quarterbacks in terms of DraftKings points per game this season. We know the home road splits with Ben. We talk about it every season, how much better of a play he is at home versus on the road. So this spot just screams fade, which means if you want to take a stab at him like Matt Ryan in a GPP, go ahead, stack the Steelers, but you're going to be spending a lot of money on a spot that is not very good for Pittsburgh's passing game.
All right, you got to love this guy. Fitzmagic, back at it last week now. Ryan Fitzpatrick getting ready for Carolina. Always finds himself in the right spot every single time. $5,500 may be tempting. Would you consider him, Felix?
Yeah, I would consider him because he's been basically in all of his starts besides against the Bears. He's been very good this season. And he came on in relief against the Bengals and played a really strong second half, almost 20 DraftKings points. So it's not the best spot in the world against the Panthers, but at his price point in a game that suggests that they should be playing from behind, Tampa's going to have to throw the ball. So I think that rather than Jeff out of nowhere throwing Alex Smith's name into cash game lineups, I would much rather trust Fitzpatrick for $500 more.
Jeffrey, can you ever trust Fitzpatrick?
Not really, to be honest, but at the same time, I mean, he's flashed upside plenty this year, and Tampa wants to throw the ball. So I think for GPPs, this is a spot I would go. I mean, we talked about Ben and Matt Ryan a bit and Alex Smith, but I think this is the upside spot personally. I mean, you know, Carolina's got a solid defense. Their secondary hasn't been that good. They've still delved into shootouts with teams that are worse than them a couple times this year, the Giants being one of those teams. So I think Fitzpatrick for tournaments is the spot you would go in this range rather than, you know, going up for Ben or a bigger name like Matt Ryan. I think Fitzpatrick makes the most sense. Well, you know, I still think Alex Smith is fine for GPPs there, Julian, but I do agree that Fitzpatrick's upside in this spot, much better in my opinion.
We'll see what the post-game outfit is as well for Mr. Fitzpatrick. Remember, we're going to say bye now, Jeff. It is Brendan. That is the first name. We'll try again next time. Thanks to you as well, Julian. Lots more on the way, including NBA later on. But first, Pat Mayo here for more on the weekend away in the NFL.
Time now for the DraftKings Sportsbook Minute. I'm Pat Mayo. The Jets are back on the road this week in Miami, 3-point dogs with a game total of 45. These teams met earlier this year, although the final score didn't really reflect it. The Dolphins controlled that game the entire way. This time around, with depleted weapons on offense for the Jets, we may get more of the same thing. I don't mind the Dolphins laying the 3, but I'm not super strong on that. The path to profit in this game may be on the prop side of things. One of the benefits of having most of the offense in triage is a more concentrated share of touches and targets for the remaining players. So, the Dolphins are a sieve run D, and this game is expected to be close, so go over on the Isaiah Crowell rushing yards. And as the big payday, take Chris Herndon IV on both first touchdown and anytime touchdown. If just one of those hits, you're profitable for weeks. That's the DraftKings Sportsbook Minute. I'm Pat Mayo.
It is a Francesa Friday. You know how we feel about that around here in the Sweat. Always a big fan. Mike Francesa joins us from WFAN in New York, of course, host of Mike's On. Mike, how are you?
Good, thanks. How's everybody doing today?
Oh, can't complain. We get to talk to you for a little while, so that'll be good. And you and I, we actually haven't spoken in a couple of weeks. Last time we did, we were talking a lot of Red Sox Yankees at that point. We know a ton has happened. The Red Sox, they've gone on to win the World Series. 4 championships now for Boston in the span of 15 years, more than any other team as far as baseball goes in this century after those 86 years of futility, which is kind of crazy to think about. How much has the narrative changed in Major League Baseball for that team?
Enormously. I mean, you know, the Red Sox were the team that could never get past the Yankees. They were the haunted franchise. You take it all the way through. 2003 into the first 3 games of 2004. Ever since then, it's been completely different. They have completely dominated. The Yankees have only won 1 World Series in that time. It completely irks the Yankees. There's no question. It will make the Yankees be very aggressive. It's created, I think, a new arms race where they'll be trying to build a better model. They'll each go after it as passionately as they can, and we should have some interesting times between the 2 teams.
Yeah, I tell you, when you have a manager of a team after winning and all the different stuff that happened in that series, the whole New York, playing it at Fenway and then playing it at the Red Sox clubhouse, and then the Red Sox singing it while they're celebrating, doing their champagne bath after winning the World Series, and then, as you said, Alex Cora saying "suck on it" about beating the Yankees. It makes you long for the days of George Steinbrenner, wishing he was still around.
Yeah, he would have been great. He would have been great to add to it. Listen, the Red Sox owners have always been very dignified in everything. Now they have a manager who wants to tweak people a little bit. Joe Torre wasn't that way. I think it just adds to the fun. I think it makes it better. So I think more power to them.
These Red Sox, 119 wins, 108 in the regular season, then another 11 in the playoffs. Most people feel this is the best Red Sox team ever. Not necessarily the most important, but the best team. Where does it rank in terms of the all-time greats?
Listen, it's very hard to compare teams and eras. I don't think it was a dominant team, but it played like a dominant team. And, that was always a great quality that the Yankee teams had in their dynasty. They didn't look like a great team, but they played like a great team. And I think that's more important. So I don't think it matters what your roster looks like. It's about how you play. And sometimes teams that look loaded don't play like championship teams. So here's a team that got something out of everybody on that roster. You go down the list and you can come up with a moment for Nunez. You come up with a moment for Holt. You come up with a moment for every guy on that team. And that's how you win championships. It really is. Look at what Pierce did. Go down the line of what everybody did out of that bullpen. So I think that's when you're really at your best, when you get everybody contributing. And they did that this year.
Well, you talked about a lot of the role players. Some of the highly paid guys certainly chipped in as well. David Price. All right, let's spend some time on this guy because he went from being considered one of the worst signings in team history by most around New England, despite some good regular season numbers in his 3 years, to World Series hero. And that is how he is going to be remembered for this run. It is how he is going to remember things. And he was awfully passionate, to say the very least, after that series concluded, calling out the media and all of his doubters and all of the critics along the way. But he also, to no surprise, opted in for the next 4 years of that contract with the Red Sox. He's due another $127 million. When he is 37 and that contract expires, how's it going to be remembered?
I don't know if it'll be that overwhelmingly popular or that favorable. But listen, you can't argue with what he did. He got a good break in that he got to pitch a game without a lot of pressure, and he pitched really well, and then he built on that. And that is the key. So listen, he got to quiet his critics. Kershaw didn't quiet his critics. So listen, Kershaw's on a different level as a pitcher, but no one can complain or get on Price. Price, he did what he had to do. He went out there, he put up zeros. If he does that, there's no other conversation. He
made sure to tell everybody with his tweets and everything else saying, I hold the cards. But this run for Boston sports in general, since the winter of 2002, 11 championships and another 5 finals losses. So 16 finals appearances for the Big Four, of course, the Red Sox, the Patriots, the Celtics, the Bruins. All 4 seemingly are still in the mix for championships over at least the next couple of years as well, which is wild. Can you think of a time in history, another city or another region over a course of a couple decade run like this? Does anything compare?
Well, I mean, you can go back to when the football giants were winning all the time and the Yankees were winning all the time. And they even shared the same locker room. And it happened a lot. The Giants had a habit in the late 50s, early 60s to losing championship games almost every year, while the Yankees were in the World Series every year. So that would be the close. Now, the Knicks weren't winning. You can go up to Boston. They didn't win in football. They didn't have an NFL team really in those days. It was an AFL team, but they were winning obviously big in basketball every single year. So no, I don't think anybody's ever had all the sports going at the same time. The closest I could come would be the Yankees and the football giants, but you didn't have the Knicks and the Rangers helping things out in those days and adding any championships. As far as all 4 sports, I don't think you've seen anything like this.
Let's do some football. If I had asked you this time yesterday who Nick Mullens is, would you have had any idea?
No, you know what? I didn't know him. I'll be honest with you. I did not know him. I was not aware of him. I was not familiar with him. And frankly, I think that's more a testimony on what's going on with the opponent than anything else right now. And I think that what Gruden wants to do is he wants to sell his management on the fact that this team couldn't compete, and this was the only way that this would work. See, I told you we're not any good, rather than we're spotty or we could have done some different things. This looks like it had to be completely broken down, and it has been completely broken down. It is an embarrassment right now.
Two guys that know an awful lot about winning, Mike, of course, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, and these guys are going to clash Sunday night. We'll have more time come Sunday to do that chat and talk about the game specifically and some of the what ifs. We'll get to some of that stuff. But just as I look at this game, you know, it's billed as this marquee thing. Sunday night, prime time's the two QBs, and it's great. And it's only the second time. Hard to believe that they're ever going head-to-head as starters during all the years they've been there and idolized one another and everything. But I don't know. Maybe I just don't think that highly of Green Bay. I don't think this is going to be the game that everyone thinks it's going to be.
I think it'll be a wild game in that I don't think either defense will stop the offense. But there's no – this is not Manning versus Brady. There's no history here. There's no rivalry here. As a matter of fact, Green Bay is not that kind of franchise, and they haven't been in recent years, and they're not right now. So from that standpoint, I think you're right. Listen, are they great players? Yes. Tom Brady, with all he's done and all he's accomplished, there's no question about where he stands. Rodgers is, to me, and I've said this before, the most physically gifted player to ever play the position. He's not the best player, but if you take everything into account that a quarterback has to do, he is the most physically gifted player, I think, who has ever played the position. But right now, he doesn't have a great team around him, and I don't think he's even 100%. But it's an attractive matchup. You know, it really is. You know, you like to see these guys on display. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I thought the Ram-Packer game last week was a great game. I thought it was the best game played in the NFL this year. I would have liked to see the last plays with Aaron if he had gotten the ball back. We all know what happened to Montgomery after he didn't take a knee. So from that standpoint, it's going to be fun to watch. I think it will be a shootout, but the Packers have to prove that they're a contending team. Right now, to me, they're just an ordinary team.
One of the fun what-ifs with this Brady-Rodgers discussion, Mike, is, you know, what if they had switched places their entire careers? And this has been a popular discussion, obviously, in the days leading up to this game. What if Brady played his whole career in that situation in Green Bay and came up under Favre and played in that system? Because really, that system, it's Rodgers who's had to fit into that system more than the system being built around Rodgers. And, you know, a lot of the way it's the system's been built around Tom Brady in New England because he's been with Bill Belichick for so long, so they've been able to figure things out together. I don't know that Brady, because he's not so physically gifted like Rodgers, he's not the mobile quarterback that Rodgers is, how he necessarily would have fared all that time in Green Bay versus Rodgers if he had been in New England the whole way. If their careers just swapped, what do you think the success would have looked like?
Rodgers would have been every bit as good as Brady. Brady wouldn't be anywhere as good as he's been. Brady was a product of being in the perfect culture. He's a hard worker. He took advantage of that. When he came in the league, he was not a physical specimen. He was a terrible physical specimen. He was not ready to play. He needed to be nurtured. He needed to be indoctrinated into the league.
What'd you think of all the trade movement this past week? You had some big names change homes, Golden Tate, Demaryius Thomas, Clinton Dix, all these guys. I mean, they led the show, but what do you think of these guys moving on?
Sign of the times. In the old days, staying with a team now 10 years is like staying with a team now 20 years for coaches. Staying with a team now 5 years is like staying, it used to be 10 years. Franchises, media, fans, everybody is completely impatient. Now, a couple of years is a long time. So now you get trades because people get impatient about players. They get impatient about players they're paying. They get impatient when things aren't going well. And that's why you get a lot of trades now, because we live in a now society and the leagues are the same way. Now, doesn't work, fire them. It doesn't work, get rid of him. Trade him, fire him, get rid of him. And that's why you see in the NFL, you never see coaches go after 1 or 2 years. Now they go after 1 or 2 years all the time. We live in that kind of society, and the NFL is a big part of it.
I'm glad you brought that up because it is a perfect transition to where I want to go next, which is doing a little bit of basketball. And a new report just came out a little while ago, Adrian Wojnarowski, ESPN, saying that the Lakers, Magic Johnson is going to be talking with Luke Walton. I don't know how stern a conversation that'll be, but basically if LA doesn't improve and very quickly, he could be on his way out the doors. LeBron James going to kill another coach here?
Probably kill a whole lot of players off the roster. Listen, that roster does not work. First of all, you cannot have players on the roster with LeBron who are at best ball handlers, and that's their greatest strength. Does not work because LeBron doesn't want to play in that system. He wants the ball. He wants the ball himself in the fourth quarter completely, and he wants to run pick and roll off it. He wants to find open 3 shooters. He doesn't want someone to find him with the ball. He doesn't want to post up. So guys who don't do anything except handle the ball and don't shoot it well don't make sense. He has to have a certain kind of play around him. He doesn't have those guys in LA. It's not the coach's fault. But if he brushes up against LeBron in any disagreement, you know who's going to win. And LeBron gave you a precursor to that, a harbinger of things to come the other day when he said, you don't want to be around me when I get upset. And he's starting to get upset. You can see him on the court starting to get upset. It's got to be him with the ball, finding players that he has confidence in. If it's not that, he will ship these guys out and bring in the guys who fill that bill. And the guys there don't fill that bill.
In the spirit of maybe getting shipped out, of course, we got to talk about Jimmy Butler. I can't believe this is still a thing. Derrick Rose, he had 50 points the other night. That was a nice little distraction from what's been going on in Minnesota. But Butler, this is just a lingering storyline and the ability, him feeling very passionately that he can't win with the likes of Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins. And are these guys enough for a championship? We know in the Western Conference, they're most certainly not, and maybe in the years to come. But right now, they're absolutely not. Still, can you think of a time that a standoff like this has gone on and lasted this long with a player of that quality?
Hey, listen, I'd send them packing. If they can get picks for him, take him and run. I am not a big fan of his. He's got ability, but he's not nearly as good as people make him out to be. And I'm telling you, that Minnesota team has to change, and he has to go. But if he goes to Houston, it will be a bigger mess. You watch. Houston had a real good thing going last year. They have completely screwed it up.
It's tough to know which NBA team would make for a better Hard Knocks in season, though, right? The Rockets, if Jimmy Butler landed there, or just the Lakers and everything that surrounds LeBron with that cast of characters.
With the Lakers, it's not that it's too predictable because you know what it is. It's just LeBron's going to get his way. The first night I watched them play, I said to someone, he will have half of this team shipped out by January. I mean, there was not a question. And I don't know where he sat with the coach. I had no idea about that. The bottom line is LeBron's going to do what he wants. This first year was just for him to get acclimated and get the guys in that he can take a run with and bring in the free agents that they can get their hands on and then take a run at it next year. But this year was a free year. I didn't expect much this year. I thought the talk of him winning 50-something games this year was crazy.
So the Celtics last night, 24 three-pointers. That's most in team history by a wide margin. I think the record had been 19 and just one shy of tying the NBA mark. Now, it's the new NBA, Mike. It's been this way for a few years. The Warriors do it better than anybody, but we've seen other teams like the Rockets, so many of them follow suit. Personally, I don't like it at all. It's not my brand of entertainment. 90s basketball was really my wheelhouse. But how do you feel about it? Is this an entertaining watch for you?
No, I don't love it, but you know what? It's not going to change. We live in this world of analytics, and the world of analytics says that there are very few good. Basically, now it's about drive it to the hole, get fouled, dunk it, or shoot a three. And that record that they set last night, they'll break within 2 weeks. I mean, that's just the way it goes. I like the Milwaukee team. I think they're going to be really good this year. I picked them as an over. I picked Toronto as an over. I'm not surprised the Celtics won last night, but I like a lot of things about the Milwaukee team. I think Toronto's playing well. I'm not surprised about it. I'm not surprised if somebody shoots 53s or 63s in a game. I mean, there's no end to it right now. And I'll give you one other one you saw last night. You saw people finally wake up and realize how good Fox is going to be. I loved Fox. I wanted the Knicks desperately to get him. I've known him since the day he showed up in Kentucky because I have a relationship with the coach there. And I'm telling you, I thought the kid was going to be special. And when you see a young guy get a 30 triple-double that starts with 30 points, like he did last night, 30, 10, and 15, whatever it was. I think it was 30, 10, and 15. You know what, a 31, 10, and 15 in 33 minutes. Now he's going to be there on the tip of everybody's tongue. He is a coming star in this league. And Sacramento's improved, but Fox is going to be a big player in the NBA, big player.
We're going to see that coach of Kentucky make his way back to the NBA at some point?
No. First of all, his wife loves Lexington. Secondly, he makes too much money. I don't think any way he goes back. I think Pitino will be back this year. The guys who said Pitino, I know a lot of people when he made his book tour said Pitino wasn't going to coach again. I said he absolutely would. I've known him 40 years. There's not a doubt in my mind. Now you see he wants to coach in the NBA again. That's why he did the tour, was that he could come back and coach in the NBA. He's dying to come back. Somebody should give him a chance because one thing about Pitino, I understand he's a lot of baggage, but the bottom line is he's a terrific coach. And if you give him talent, he will win on any level. He'll win as much as anybody because he'll figure out a way to win, and he cares greatly about developing players and winning. And he will coach in the NBA again. He wanted to coach the Bucks this year. They didn't want him. He'll get a job. Calipari, I don't think ever goes back. His wife's from a small town. She's from Kansas. That's where he met her when he was an assistant at Kansas. She had been married to a great player in the NFL. People might not realize, named Nolan Cromwell. That was her first marriage when she was very young. And then she married John after that. After they had, that marriage was over. But that's where he met her in Kansas. She's a small town girl, so she likes Lexington, and she's the boss. He'll stay in Lexington.
You really think so? Just on Pitino quickly before I let you go here. He's said he's clearly, as you noted, he wants to come back. He wants to coach in the NBA.
Well, 3 months ago, everybody wrote there was no chance he was ever coaching again. That's what he said when he did the book tour. He said it to me too, and I said, "You're full of baloney." I knew he was going to coach again, and now he wants to coach again. I never thought for a second he wasn't going to coach. He's a coach. He's dying to coach again.
Well, it's like Larry Brown. Just going to do it until they die on the sideline, kind of thing.
Larry would coach a CYO team. He would coach biddy basketball. Larry wants to coach anybody, anytime. He is a coach. It's not about money. It's not about anything. He loves to coach. Rick's the same way. Rick's got more money than he could ever spend. Rick wants a team to coach. He'd like to be back in college. He's never getting back in college. They won't have him. Some NBA team will take a chance on him. But it'll be a team that's desperate. That's the problem. He won't get a really talented team because he's considered to be one of those guys that a real big star is going to say, I don't want that kind of coach. He's going to overachieve with a team that doesn't have a lot of talent. That's the kind of team he'll get. But he'll do well with it. He won't win a championship because that's about having great players. But he'll do a good job with some team that you think will win. If he gets a team that's terrible, they won't win 25 games. They'll win 40 games because that's who he is.
See, that's where I disagree, and that's where I'd love for us to be able to continue this conversation another point when he's actually in the league and has the chance, especially from having watched him up close in Boston. I know he had the success that he did in New York.
He did a great job with the Knicks team. In Boston, the problem was he went there for the wrong reasons. He went there because he wanted Tim Duncan, and he didn't get Tim Duncan, and he went into a depression when he didn't get Tim Duncan, and that was the end of it. He went there for the wrong reason. He can coach. He can coach with anybody who's ever coached. He's a great coach. Now, there in the league, remember, in that league, you got to coach the right kind of guys because if you get the big star, you have to let him be as involved as the coach is. He doesn't work well in that kind of system. That won't work for him. He has to be with a team that doesn't have a great amount of talent. He'd be better with that kind of team.
Well, like I said, once he's in the league, because I'm with you, I think he's going to get the opportunity. I look forward to keeping up with that one.
He'll get a job somewhere, but it would be with a bad team probably.
Mike Francesa, thank you, sir.
Hey, take care. Thank you.
Welcome to Price Check. I'm Pierce Dietrich. Let's look at the salaries for Texas. Whose salary jumped up this week? Joey Logano, $9,500 up to $10,500. The price keeps going up, but I'm done. I'm off. He's not even racing the next 2 weeks, and he's gonna get wrecked at Miami. AJ Allmendinger, $6,200 up to $6,900. Road courses, play him. Martinsville, play him. Everywhere else, hard pass. Denny Hamlin, 8,500 up to 9,100. Too cheap last week, too expensive this week. Not playing him at an intermediate track. Whose salary dropped this week? Kyle Larson, 11,500 down to $10,000. He was fast in the first Texas race before he wrecked. But in that first half of the race, he recorded 13 fast laps. Kevin Harvick, 12,500 down to 11,700. He scored over 100 fantasy points in the first Texas race, and he's averaging 81 points at the 1.5-mile racetracks. Brad Keselowski, 10,200 down to 9,500. He won at Las Vegas. He won at Darlington, but a lot of drivers made mistakes in those races. Don't count on him. Don't count him out either. Favorite play of the week, Kyle Busch, 12,200. He won the first Texas race. He scored over 100 fantasy points. He's averaging the most fantasy points at the intermediate tracks this season. William Byron, 5,800. At this price, I'll play the rookie any track, including Rainbow Road. By the way, he finished 10th in the first Texas race. All right, guys, check out the DK Playbook for your DFS information and needs if you've got NASCAR questions. Hit me up on Twitter at @RaceForThePrize. I'm Pierce Dietrich. Catch me on DK Live.
Carolyn Ezek in with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. Dwight Howard returns tonight from a lower back injury and is making his debut for the Wizards as they host the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Wizards have been struggling so far this season, off to a 1-6 start, and they are hoping Howard's defense and rebounding will help them get back on track. Washington gives up the most points per game in the NBA and 27th in rebound percentage. Washington will also have Markieff Morris back, who missed last game after entering the NBA's concussion protocol. Coach Scott Brooks is planning on starting his big man Howard against OKC, but unsure as to how many minutes he will play. If you dare roster Dwight, he can be owned for $5,200 in the 8-game slate. So, will Howard's return add spark to his team? We'll see tonight. Tip-off is at 8.
Obviously, Gurley comes in at number 1. Melvin Gordon may be back. He's number 2 at $8,200. We have no word on whether he's going to play or not yet. We haven't seen the injury updates on how his hamstring status is going. Then it's like Christian McCaffrey, Kareem Hunt. Alvin Kamara is down to $7,300. Connor's at $72 against Baltimore. Bad matchup, but still James Conner gets involved in the passing game. And then at the $6,000 level, it's Cohen and Adrian Peterson. That's it. So if you don't go with Todd Gurley, like, where else do you go in this range? Because I'm just looking at Kareem Hunt and being like, how does this go wrong? But I know it will go wrong because I so rarely use Kareem Hunt because I'm like, oh, this is the week where he doesn't score a touchdown. Then all of a sudden he's great.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing about potentially fading Todd Gurley. And that's why the ownership is going to get so incredibly high this week, is the fact that there just aren't a lot of alternatives. I think Christian McCaffrey will be the first alternative that people look to. The market share of targets has declined as Greg Olsen has come back, but the matchup with Tampa Bay's defense, who's just giving up 30-plus points seemingly every week and losing key defenders seemingly every week. It's been, Gerald McCoy and Quan Alexander the last few weeks, and then Vita Vea, they lost last week due to an injury. So they're just really, really banged up, and I think Carolina's running game is going to be the next place to attack after Gurley.
So do you think that Kamara will go criminally under-owned because of the price tag, because of the split that he's seen with that awful Mark Ingram since he's returned? Like, this is a game, you talk about the total, it's almost approaching 60. It's that game and it's the Tampa-Carolina game that are the two really high totals on the slate. So if you're going to game stack, is there a way that you can figure out to get Gurley and Kamara in a lineup just to... If Gurley's going to be 40% owned, I doubt Kamara cracks like 12%. Like, no one wants to play this guy. Michael Thomas is kind of the same way too, but people might gravitate more towards him thinking, hey, if the Saints are trailing, they'll have to pass, therefore you use Michael Thomas. Kamara might be the guy that benefits the most from this.
I actually think it's going to be the opposite between Kamara and Thomas this week. I think Kamara's performance against the Vikings, where he scored 2 touchdowns, is going to get people back on that train where the price tag is a little bit lower this week. And the fact that the wide receiver pool is so much deeper due to the trades, opening up a lot of value, and the running back pool is so thin. So I think Kamara is going to garner ownership. I think he will be a popular play on the Saints side, where they're starting to spread things out more. These Taysom Hill, like Wildcat type packages, are really kind of screwing things up in terms of a concentrated market share that we saw early in the season for both Kamara and Michael Thomas. I mean, obviously Ingram is a big part of it, but the Taysom Hill stuff is also an issue. I think he's going to be owned. I think he should be owned. I think he's the best part to target because I think he's at a thinner position than Michael Thomas, and I think he's also the better way to attack in terms of getting him in space. Him and Michael Thomas should be the 2 highest owned Saints from that game. I would definitely take them ahead of Mark Ingram.
Yeah, I was thinking like Traquan Smith might be a reasonable play as well with the amount of snaps that he's playing on the outside. If they do have to pass, that's sort of the cheaper alternative. And then you get that big play potential. And I don't think as many people will be on him because Courtland Sutton's such a value that you have to take him, and he's going to be owned at a ridiculous clip this week. But at the running backs, like you have like Cohen, he's a bit pricey at 62 for the workload that he gets. He has to break a big one. But like Adrian Peterson is $6,000. I don't know if you like him or not, but I'm still concerned that Chris Thompson may or may not be limited. He may not even play. Like they're saying that's a pain threshold thing for him with this rib injury. He kind of played last week, but not much. And Washington seems super committed to giving Adrian Peterson the ball like 25 times a game.
Joining us now on The Sweat, former NFL wide receiver and Green Bay Packers Hall of Famer Antonio Freeman. Thanks so much for your time today. Well, everyone is geared up for Sunday Night Football between the Packers and Patriots in Foxborough. When you hear Rodgers-Brady, where does your mind go, and how would you describe that comparison?
I automatically go to the number 12. I was a big Roger Staubach fan. I grew up a Cowboys fan, and we often had battles against another number 12, Terry Bradshaw. So I think about the legends, the greatness of the game, and how those two quarterbacks have played at a high level and stayed at a high level and been consistent for a period of over a decade. And that's so hard to do with so many interchangeable players coming in and out of free agency and things of that nature. And with Tom Brady, I mean, he does it with anybody. You put anybody out there, he's going to always continue to show his forms of greatness, and the same with Aaron Rodgers. You're never out of a game with Aaron Rodgers.
So that's one of the similarities, I guess, right? Both quarterbacks keep their teams in games. What are some similarities when you look at both players on, off the field? Take it wherever you want.
Well, I look at on the field and just the amount of study that they put into the game. So therefore, it requires a lot of study from the other players, the offensive linemen, the quarterback, the wide receivers and running backs. I hear a lot in Green Bay how Aaron Rodgers has the wide receivers take a test before game day. And it doesn't matter if you're an 8-year veteran or you're a rookie. You're susceptible to being called up front and being held accountable for knowing your business. And that's what I see in both of those quarterbacks. I often hear Tom Brady say, just do your job. And, just so many similarities in the way that they play, the passion they play with, the success they've had because of the film work and the extra study and the demands on other players, which sometimes are uncomfortable for other stars in the game.
You know, your expertise is engraved in Green Bay, of course, spending so many seasons there in your long tenure, 9-10-year career. Brett Favre was a quarterback that you played with, of course, back in '97, winning the Super Bowl. You had a great season leading the league in wide receiving yards in 1998. When you look at Rodgers, maybe comparing him to Brett Favre, having that 1 year to play behind Brett, what makes Rodgers unique in that sense? When you look at just the background of where Rodgers came into the draft, first-round pick behind Favre, sits behind him for a year, struggles in his first year as a pro. What are some things that make Rodgers unique when you compare your time with Brett Favre?
His uniqueness is his patience. When you're drafted first round as a quarterback, you don't expect to be sitting around, and he had to sit around for a number of years and watch Brett Favre not only be successful, but still play at a high level. And, I think Rodgers sitting behind Brett through those years, he not only got to learn the great things about Brett and what Brett did great, he got to learn what not to do, the not so cool things to do, maybe the interceptions, maybe holding on to the football a little too long, giving up a sack. So he was able to really chime in and take the pros of Brett Favre's, the cons of Brett Favre's, put them in all one basket, and then combine them with his own skill set. And I did that the same way when I came in as a wide receiver. I watched everybody. I took a little from each guy. I put it in the same bag with my own set of skills, and I went ahead with it. And that's the same way that I see Aaron Rodgers. There's no doubt that he came out as the first-round pick for the Packers, expecting and wanting to play, not wanting to sit behind Brett. And at that point in time, you can either tank it or you can hone your craft. And I think he honed his craft. He was familiar with the guys. When the change was made, I remember calling Charles Woodson and Al Harris, and they said, Free, he's ready.
Antonio Freeman, former Packers receiver and team Hall of Famer, joining us on the Sweat. Let's discuss some of the wide receivers with Green Bay. Davante Adams, 2 quiet years before he really came on the scene. 10 touchdowns last year. He's already up to 6 this season through 8 weeks. What makes him so dynamic as a wide receiver? And more specifically, why is he such a threat when it comes to red zone targets?
He must be a heck of a dancer, because I have seen him dunk a basketball. So he's a heck of an athlete with great footwork. And when he came in as a rookie, those first 2 years, he struggled with the drops. And I remember the fans and the media being very critical of him. And I just remember looking at him and saying, if this kid can ever get it with not dropping any footballs or making those catches, I knew he had the athletic ability to play in the system and to beat one-on-one matchups. When I watch his footwork, when I watch his technique at the line of scrimmage, it's all consistent. It's all the same. He attacks defenders. He understands the game. And he's had his ups and downs. And now he's shining. He used those low moments to propel him to be a greater person, to study a little harder, and maybe to stay after practice a little and catch footballs off the judge. So I'm very impressed with not only what I see in Davante Adams week in and week out, but what I've seen Davante Adams grow from and become this elite receiver for the Green Bay Packers. The unfortunate thing is you'd like to have 2 of those guys on both sides, put Randall Cobb in the middle, and get us a bona fide back. I don't think we've drafted a big back since Eddie Lacy.
Mark the tape, November 2nd, 2018. Antonio Freeman wants Davante Adams on Dancing with the Stars. It will happen, maybe someday down the road. Hey, let's go to another wide receiver who is coming back from injury. That's Geronimo Allison. He's shown some flashes of talent and giving Aaron Rodgers another option through the air. What do you expect from Allison the rest of the way?
My greatest memory of Allison was I was like a group leader at the NFL Combines, and Geronimo Allison didn't run his 40 time, and he had a depressing look on his face. I was a group mentor, exactly. And I just remember saying to him, you know, why aren't you running? And he said he was going to run at his pro day. And he said, you know, I know people are going to shy away from me because I'm not a fast guy, but when I get on the field, I just know how to play football. And then my true talents will be able to show. And fast forward 3 years, I'm standing in an elevator in Green Bay the night before a game, and who walks into the elevator but Geronimo Allison? And I asked him, do you remember that conversation we had at the NFL Combines? And he said, yep, I got to go get it. And just a hard-working young man, not a fast young man, but just a guy who comes in, and you're seeing Aaron Rodgers begin to be comfortable with him. And that takes time. You're seeing these young receivers struggle with gaining Aaron's confidence. Geronimo Allen is one of those guys that he's grabbed Aaron Rodgers' attention, and Aaron Rodgers feels comfortable throwing the football to him.
You know, you mentioned Randall Cobb having that option through the middle for Aaron Rodgers, but Cobb brings that veteran presence to this younger group of receivers. You can attest to this. How important is his presence to help elevate the rest of these wideouts for Green Bay?
His presence is important, but let's not get it mixed up. His production is way more important, especially the state of Wisconsin and Packer fans. They've been sad since the loss of Jordy Nelson, and they're looking for a big bang if you're going to be the replacement for Jordy Nelson. So he not only needs to be a leader in that locker room, and I think he can get some of that from Davante Adams being in the league for over 5 years here, but they really need his production more than anything on that football field, because third down has been a 50-50 ball for the Green Bay Packers. Some games they're above 50, a lot of games they're below. And I think having Randall Cobb, not just as your number 2 receiver, but back in the slot where the matchups are favorable for a Randall Cobb, and then you can get Geronimo Allison back on the outside.
Yeah, Cobb averaging just over 5 receptions a game. That's like his highest clip in 4 years, so he's turning back the clock a bit. Again, we have Antonio Freeman, 1997 Super Bowl champion, 2009 Packers Hall of Famer joining us. Hey, Jimmy Graham, a nice pickup for the Packers a year ago. What has he meant to this team, and how can he further bring this offense along? Do you think Graham's been used properly? What else is in store for Jimmy Graham at the tight end position in Green Bay?
Well, if I look at the history of free agent tight end acquisitions in the last 5 years of the Green Bay Packers, I would say that his upside is on the back end of the schedule. And you saw Jared Cook, one of those guys who had a lot of success in the latter part of the season. And if Packer fans remember that great catch against the Dallas Cowboys on the sideline. So I look at our tight end from last year. It took a while for him to get started. And when Rodgers got hurt, I think the frustration settled in and he just wanted out. But I think your best times with Graham is going to be later in the year. I'm not impressed with the one touchdown. I don't know if it's Jimmy not getting open or the red zone calls, but I thought it would be more of a factor in the red zone. But he is still a factor when you think about it, because when you look at Devontae Adams with those 6 touchdowns that you touched on earlier, that has a lot to do with the presence of a Jimmy Graham. So even though he's not getting those touches and those touchdowns, his presence is allowing opportunities for other guys. Stanton Valdez is another young kid that now Jimmy Graham's presence allows these guys the matchups on the outside that they're so favorable for. And I know that's not good news for fantasy owners.
We'll get to the fantasy elements in just a bit. We're really breaking down the offensive pieces of this Green Bay Packers team. Want to focus more on the team element now. The team is 3-3-1, coming off a tough loss to the Rams. They have a chance now to go to Foxborough, as we discussed from the top, to knock off the Patriots. I want to focus in on the trade deadline this past Tuesday. Clinton Dix, Ty Montgomery, both out the door. It seems now, looking at the rest of the division, that made some moves, being aggressive. Of course, Detroit gives up on Golden Tate, but altogether, it feels like the Packers are now more of an underdog or more vulnerable than they've been before in the NFC North. Do they have that underdog mentality right now, or do you think the team's confidence should remain high since they just played with arguably the best team in football last week, a team that is still undefeated?
I think the confidence should remain high. Anytime you have the other number 12, Aaron Rodgers, in the back, taking a snap from center, you always have an opportunity to win a football game. And I think you talked about those 2 trades. That was one of the frustrating things a week ago, was not seeing Aaron Rodgers have a chance to get that football in his hand one more time to see if he can pull off some more magic. And Tyrone Montgomery obviously was one of those guys who was pretty much unhappy with how it was being used. He had single-digit carries all season. I think he's just tipping the 100-yard mark for rushes. But he was a guy that I know was unhappy with his role, wanted more carries, wanted more touches, wanted more pass protection blocks. And sometimes that frustration boils over. You talk about Clinton Dix. Well, for me, I've watched the replenishment of this Green Bay Packers secondary over the years. We use Casey Hayward. Morgan Burnett's gone. We've lost all of our secondary guys that we drafted. So it was no doubt in my mind that Clinton Dix would be next, especially figuring the high price tag he would want in free agency.
All right. Hey, let's get into the fun stuff. Let's talk some fantasy football. The Packers are a fun team to roster. Rodgers, Allison, Adams, Jimmy Graham. We went through a bunch of names already. Do you play fantasy football in any capacity? And if so, how's your team doing? And do you have any current Packers on your teams?
I've played in the past. I've played several leagues, and it gets confusing to me on Sundays trying to scramble lineups. So I just help my son now. He's 14, so he plays fantasy. I'm his advisor. And if he has any advice, which kids today normally don't, I'm always there for him.
Good for you. Well, hey, does he have any current Packers on his team or what?
Yeah, he's got Rodgers. He has Randall Cobb. So those 2 guys, at least week 1, put in some big points for him.
That's required, I would assume, out of you. Packer on the roster. Hey, back in your playing days, the evolution of fantasy sports was still going on. But do you ever remember when in your playing days, fans barking at you, positive or negative, about having you on their fantasy team? Did you ever hear any of that?
Yeah, I remember the fans saying a lot about it. I remember my brother, my older brother, talking a lot about it after the game and how his team won. And I'm like, of course your team won. You came to see the Packers. But he was always making reference to his fantasy football team and how my production kind of gave him an edge, and he won some of those crucial games down the stretch. And I think he actually won a Super Bowl fantasy football a year or two. And my production late in the season had a lot to do with that. So he would constantly remind me. And before the game, he would say, man, you need to have a big game today. And I thought he really wanted me to have a big game, but he really wanted his fantasy football team to win.
Packers Hall of Famer Antonio Freeman with us on The Sweat. We will get you out on this. A prediction for us, please, for Sunday night.
Man, I was so close last week. It's going to be tough. We're going to Foxborough, playing against a great team. Packer Nation's listening. So we got to score a lot of points this year if we're going to get it done. We have to score 38-34. That's the only way we're going to win.
All right.
Packers.
Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see how it goes. It could be a shootout in Foxborough Sunday night. Antonio Freeman, Packers Hall of Famer, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me. Go, Pack, go.
Time now for the DraftKings Sportsbook Minute. I'm Pat Mayo. The NFL trade deadline doesn't possess the same cachet as baseball or basketball in terms of movement, but it's getting better every year. The Texans acquiring Demaryius Thomas to replace Will Fuller is still a net loss, really. And considering they're already minus 200 favorites to win the AFC South, there's no value in that. You just want to punt that division? Just back the Colts at 10-1 on a flyer. They're not completely out of it yet. But the actual improvement came in the NFC East. The Eagles have been terrible this year, and they're still 4-4, just a game and a half behind the Redskins for first in that division. Getting Golden Tate doesn't make them as good as last season, but it helps, as does the bye week. They're better than Washington, have 2 games left against them, and Philly is plus 175 to win the East. This is the best bet in the post-deadline world. That is the DraftKings Sportsbook Minute. I'm Pat Mayo.
Carolyn Azek in with your DraftKings Fantasy Flash. San Francisco 49ers young gun quarterback Nick Mullens made an unreal NFL debut last night, leading the 49ers to a 34-3 win over the Raiders. The 2017 undrafted free agent out of Southern Miss, the same school as Brett Favre, put up historic numbers against the Oakland Raiders. Favre actually gave him a congratulatory call after the game. Mullens joined Mark Bulger, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Marcus Mariota as the only players over the past 25 seasons to throw for 3 or more touchdowns in their first game. He also became the only quarterback in NFL history to be verified by Twitter mid-game. 49ers coach Kyle Shanahan said, he's a machine in there, and I was happy for him. It's up in the air if we will see an encore performance by Mullens on November 12th versus the Giants, since Beathard should have plenty of time to recover. Coach Shanahan said after the game he is not ready to declare a starter for Week 10.
Let's talk some hoop before we escape for the weekend. NBA over-under with Adam Mancuda of Phantom Sports and Action Network's Matt LaMarca. 8-game slate in the association, fellas. It was just 8 short years ago when Dwight Howard was in the NBA Finals, and he is set to make his debut with the Wizards. His 5th different team since his Orlando days. Over-under 40 fantasy points for the aging Superman at 5,200 against the Thunder. We'll start with you, Mancuda.
You cannot call this guy Superman. Come on. Not with a straight face. Come on. The guy's butt hurt. That's why he's been out the first month. So give me the under. I just don't trust him. I don't think he can stay healthy. And again, he's not going to, make up points at the free throw line. We all know that. He'll grab a bunch of boards. But let's see him develop any chemistry with John Wall and Bradley Beal. My guess is by the end of tonight, they'll want him out as per the normal with this guy. So give me the under. I just can't bank on him going over 40 tonight.
LaMarca, your thoughts on Dwight Howard?
Dwight Howard was actually pretty good last year for the Hornets, but this is an easy under for me. I just don't think he's going to play full minutes in his first game back. We just have him projected for 16 over at Fantasy Labs. I mean, the guy can't even sit on the bench yet. His butt apparently hurts so much that he can't sit down. He's going to have to lay on the sidelines when he's not in the game. So that doesn't inspire a ton of confidence for me.
One of the few guys who can be butthurt based on his attitude and be butthurt in terms of an injury.
Well, based on that description by LaMarca, I'm starting to wonder if I've ever had the same issues as Dwight Howard before.
You sit down too long, I guess, right?
Yeah.
All right, Zach LaVine having a fantastic second season with the Bulls this year. 49 DK points, season best on Halloween against the Nuggets recently here. So how does 40 sound tonight? A little more manageable against the Pacers. LaVine is 7,600. What do you think there, Matt?
I think it's pretty close. I'm going to go with the slightest of unders. I think the Pacers are a tough matchup. Victor Oladipo, second best defender in the league at the shooting guard position last season, in terms of defensive real plus minus. I also think Jabari Parker moving into the starting lineup has to hurt Levine from a usage perspective at least a little bit. So I think 40's close, but I might go under. I'll say something like 38.
Adam, you want to round up?
Yeah, I'll round up. I'll take the over on this. I think that because of how the Pacers play at a very high pace, no pun intended, I think that this will go over. I think that it's going to be a showdown between him and Oladipo in terms of points and assists and who's going to make the most highlight plays. Oladipo just is coming off a great game against the Knicks. I just like what Levine has done here this year. He's really taken that leadership role in terms of the scoring. So I'm going to go over this week just to be devil's advocate with Matt.
Kyle Lowry has seen his fantasy numbers go up significantly this year with Kawhi Leonard, without DeMar DeRozan on the floor. Does he go over 45 fantasy points tonight against the Suns? He's 8,400. He's surpassed that number of 45 4 times in Toronto's 8 games. Adam, let's go to you on that one.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go over here. And remember something, Kawhi is just a better facilitator when he has the ball than DeMar DeRozan, despite the fact that DeRozan is setting career highs with his assist numbers in San Antonio. For me, the point guard position for the Suns is a mess. Devin Booker doesn't look like he's going to play tonight. So I think Lowry will have his way. He'll get a bunch of boards to increase his point total, get a bunch of assists. I think Toronto wins this easily. The only concern I have about that point total is if this game's a blowout like it really could be by the third quarter, is he going to reach that number? But I think he's going to be the reason they get there, so give me the over.
Action Matt, Lowry in the desert. You into it?
I'm going under again. Another slight under, but an under. Lowry has been awesome this year, but the way he's been doing it has been piling up assists. He's going to shatter his previous career high if he keeps this pace up. But his usage rate is down. He's made up for that by making over 51% of his shots from the field. He's a career 42.6% shooter. So I think he's definitely going to be looking at some regression in that department moving forward. And if he does, it's going to be hard for him to continue to put up the same fantasy numbers. You know, Adam also mentioned the blowout factor. That's definitely a concern I have as well. So with all that in mind, I'll go with another slight under here on 45.
I'm getting the feeling that Matt LaMarca only likes old point guards now after his solid pick on Derrick Rose. No on Levine, no on Lowry. Yeah, just give me Derrick Rose every night.
Play the
John Wall
guys.
tonight. He's the guy.
Definitely a Wall play. All right, let's. I love this guy. We're going to talk about him. Luka Doncic. He has flashed a potential Rookie of the Year campaign so far. Leads the Mavs in scoring. $7,400 over under 38 DK points against the Knicks. All right, I want to tell you, he has hit that number 3 times so far this season. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I'm going with another slight under.
Poor young guys.
You mentioned he's done it 3 times, but he's played 8 games. That means he hasn't done it in 5 games. I don't think the Knicks are a particularly good matchup. They're not great on defense, but they're just 24th in pace this season. So, yeah, I think Doncic is a good play. He's definitely somebody that I love as a rookie. I mean, he's doing things at 19 years old that haven't been done in, almost a decade since LeBron came into the league. But I just don't see it tonight for 38 DK points.
I love it. He's really good, but not tonight. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I happen to agree with Matt on this one. Originally, when this question came out, I was going to go over. Then I just, thought about it a little more, and I realized how hard the Knicks are actually playing, especially in the Garden. I think that Luka's going to want to put on a show there. Maybe he gets a little amped up, misses a few shots early. I think 38 is a pretty big total, and I think he's been outstanding so far this season. He had 31, obviously, earlier in the week. But for me, I'm just going to go under and play it safe. I would probably say around 32 to 33 tonight for Luka.
All right, we've got 2 of these left, so let's be quick. Clint Capella, 7,800 against the Nets. Over, under 40. Mancuda, back to you.
Under. I just think that the Jared Allen factor there, the presence that he's going to have on the boards, is going to be a little too much for Capella. I don't see him going that high, but I could see him going in the low 30s.
LaMarca?
This is my over pick. I like him here. Brooklyn, not great against opposing centers. They just gave up a 20-20 game to Andre Drummond last time out. And Capella is playing a career high in terms of minutes this season. So he's always been really good on a per-minute basis. Now he's playing, upwards of 34 minutes a game. I think it's a good spot for him.
Last one. You each have 20 seconds. Steph Curry is having the best fantasy season of his career so far. It's early, but he's averaging about 53 DK points per. But with these Warriors, you never know who's going to eat, who's going to rest, who's going to take a back seat, whatever. So do you expect Curry to go over or under 55 fantasy points tonight against the Timberwolves? Adam, back to you.
I'm going to go over. The guy's been, to me, the MVP of the season. Obviously, we're only 2 weeks in, but he's just shooting remarkable percentages, playing at a very, very high level. Obviously, Klay Thompson feeds off him. So if Klay's hitting 8 to 10 threes, and you're obviously going to get a bunch of assists from him as well. I think this game is going to have also a very high score. So give me Curry over that ridiculous number.
Matthew, fast.
No, under.
Perfect.
Wow.
Thanks,
Nice
boys.
and brief.
You're good.
Okay, well, let's
they follow
tune in.
Instructions well.
Yes, they do. Sunday, 11:30 a.m., we have The Sweat here on the DK Live app, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We're going to go stuff our faces now with candy. Bye-bye.
Monday through Friday, 6 Eastern. Happy Halloween.